This is not just a story about a courtroom. It's about truth and what it costs to tell it. 30 years old, a third-grade teacher, soft-spoken, with the kind of voice that soothes crying children and rattles racists. The kind of man who never raised his voice, even when the world screamed at him. Elijah lived in Atlanta, where being black, kind, and educated still made him a target. He'd spent his life teaching kids to think, to feel, to stand up when it mattered. But he never expected to become the lesson himself. Elijah was driving home from school. Late again, papers still stacked in the passenger seat. He was 5 blocks from his apartment when the blue lights flared behind him. License and registration. The officer was young, white. His nameplate read Officer Grant Milton. But Elijah would come to know it far too well. Elijah handed over his ID. No words. No questions. Then Grant asked him to step out. No explanation. No cause. Elijah said quietly, "Officer, why am I being pulled over?" The response was swift, cold. "Step out or I'll drag you out." The world turned sideways after that. Elijah was yanked from the car, thrown onto wet asphalt. His papers flew like birds in a storm. He was cuffed, arrested, charged with resisting arrest, and assaulting a police officer. There was no body cam footage. Apparently malfunctioned. There were no witnesses, just one man's word against another. And Elijah, the schoolteacher, stood accused of a crime he didn't commit. But the courtroom is where the real story began. 3 months later, a courtroom stained with history. On one side, Officer Grant Milton, in full uniform, calmed. On the other, Elijah in a suit borrowed from his father, hands folded like prayer. The DA built a story that Elijah had lunged at Officer Milton, that he had reached under his seat, that the officer had feared for his life. But it was a lie. And Elijah knew it. And so did one person in that room, Judge Mary Ann Langford. Elijah's lawyer, Angela Kim, was relentless. She subpoenaed dispatch audio, surveillance footage from a gas station 2 blocks down, and finally, a blurry but clear enough cell phone video taken from an apartment window. The video showed everything. Elijah standing, calm, hands visible. Grant lunging at him. In that moment, the courtroom fell to silence. The jury stared. Officer Milton looked away. Then came the judge's verdict. Her voice didn't rise, but it cut like truth. This court finds a defendant, Elijah Brooks, not guilty of all charges. Furthermore, this court refers a matter of Officer Grant Milton's conduct to the district attorney's office for perjury and civil rights violations. And just like that, the mask cracked. Grant Milton, the man in blue, began to cry. Tears not of remorse, but fear, not for what he'd done, but for being seen. Elijah didn't celebrate. He walked out quietly outside the courthouse. Reporters shoved mics in his face. One asked, "What do you want people to know?" He looked into the camera, calm and tired. "I want them to know that being innocent doesn't always protect you. But truth still matters. And sometimes it wins." This story is a reminder that the scales of justice are not always balanced, but sometimes, just sometimes, someone leans hard enough on the truth to tilt them back. It's not about vengeance. It's about accountability. And in a country where uniform sometimes means immunity, Elijah Brooks proved that courage, truth, and persistence can still make a crack in the wall. Moral of the story: in a world where lies wear uniforms and power protects its own, the truth often walks alone, bloodied but unbroken. This story is not just about a man who was wronged. It's about a system that too often expects silence from the wounded. But silence is not safety, and dignity is not negotiable. Elijah's courage reminds us that even when the world demands you bow your head, there is power in standing tall, in bearing witness, in telling the truth, and in refusing to let fear rewrite your story. Because real justice doesn't begin in courtrooms. It begins in the hearts of those brave enough to speak, even when they shake.